Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of 2022, the first Ask Abhijit live episode of 2022. I wish you all a very happy Gregorian New Year to those of you who celebrate it. I hope that you have a very successful, happy, prosperous, and healthy New Year. So, as you know, this is a session in which I'm going to take questions from the comments. So let us take a very appropriate first question for this year. Okay, so this is the first question. Bring something new to your channel and please tell us your new plans for 2022. Any books in the making, new YouTube channels, new documentaries, etc. Very good question. So it's time to make the announcements of what's going to change this year. So in the past year, I did 72 live streams. Ask Abhijit. I took thousands of questions. It was a very unstructured year. I was just taking your questions and I was answering them all. And I was releasing a lot of short clips throughout the past 6 months or so. So the first thing that changes this year is that there will be no more short clips. That ends right away. The second thing is again more of the same. I'm going to do 100. I'm planning to target 100 episodes of the Ask Abhijit show this year. So that's going to continue as before. The third thing, and this is new, I am planning to have at least 50 conversations with guests on this channel right here. So that is something which I have done only once or twice before on this channel. I interviewed Dr. Subhash Kak and I spoke with Abhijit Iyer Mitra. This year, I'm going to take it to a whole different level. I'm going to do at least minimum 50 such conversations with selected guests. So I am a very curious person. I have lots of interests, very diverse interests. So I'm going to call people from different backgrounds, people who are doing interesting work, interesting people from different fields. And the objective is to have an interesting extended conversation with them. I want to learn things from various people. I want you all to gain interesting new knowledge and learn new things from these guests. So in case you all have some suggestions for me to call some people, let me know in the comments below. I will certainly take all of your suggestions very seriously. I cannot promise that I'll invite all of them, but I will certainly take it very seriously and invite as many of them as I can. And I also have some people in mind over the long run. So that is something new that's going to happen on this channel. Apart from this, I am going to do 50 documentaries on one of my other channels. So I have a couple of two, three other channels that are not really very active right now. One of these channels is going to see the release of 50 documentary style videos starting from the second or third week of January, and it's going to continue week upon week. So that is the thing. Now, are there any books in the making? Yes, it is now time that I should write some books. So one book that I'm going to be writing this year is, I would call it tentatively, The Best of Ask Abhijit. So over the past 6 months, I've answered thousands of questions, and many of you have asked me for references that, where did you get this information for? So I'm going to take, let's say, the best 150 questions, answer them in the written form, and provide references. So I've already answered the questions. You don't need to buy the books, but in case you want it in written form with references, you can go ahead and buy the book whenever it is released. I am planning to do it as fast as possible, next 5-6 months maximum. So the best of Ask Abhijit, that's the first book. The second book I'll be working on is an overview of Indian history, the past 70,000 years. Right. So it will be an easy to read book, a reasonably fast paced book, easy to read for everybody, in which I will be touching upon the entirety of the past 70,000 years of Indian history, and I'll bring out many facets of Indian history that most people don't know about. So I will try my best to make it as informative and put out as much new information as I can in this book. So that is the second book, and I also want to write a third book in this year. The working title I could give it is Astrophysics for Everyone. So it will cover. It will give knowledge about the Earth, the solar system, the galaxy, the universe, and everything in between. It will again be an easy to understand book. I think even a 13 year, the target which I have is that even a 13-year-old kid should be able to understand it. It should not be complicated and difficult to understand. So these are the things that I want to do this year: 100 Ask Abhijit episodes, at least 50 conversations, 50 documentaries, 3 books, and some other things as well. So that is a ton. It's not a ton of work, it's a megaton, a gigaton of work that I'm going to be doing this year. So so that is the plan. It's certainly a whole lot of work, but if you want to reach the moon, you have to aim for the star. So that's the philosophy I am adopting. And let's have a review on December 31 and see how much of this I have accomplished. But I am planning, I'm targeting to accomplish all of this. So that, I hope, answers this question. Okay, Karan says how to become successful, and Rohan says, I know you don't get such questions very often, but since it's the new year, do you have any advice on how one should set and achieve his or her goals? Good questions. So, like I just said, I have these enormous goals in front of me for the year 2022. Very ambitious goals. So, it will require a lot of hard work from my part, from my side. Now, to become successful and for goal setting, we have to first understand the difference between a goal and a dream. Understand the difference between a goal and a dream. A dream is I want to have 3 books at the end of the year. A dream is I want to have 100 Ask Abhijit episodes by the end of the year. A dream is I want to have at least 50 conversations, extended conversations with guests by the end of this year. These are dreams. Now, to make these dreams reality, you need a plan, which is a process. What is a process? You wake up in the morning, then you do this every day. That's a process. These many hours for this work, this many hours for this task, and so on. And the goal that you should have is to follow the process faithfully every day. So the process is the goal, and your what you call goals are your dreams. It is the process that converts those dreams into reality if you work hard day in and day out. And the thing is, when you make a process and you start implementing it, you will find the need to tweak the process, because once you start walking the talk, then you will realize that maybe the process isn't very efficient. So after a few days, you will realize you will have to change some parts of the process. After a couple of weeks, you will have to change something else. After a month or 2 months, once you have made lots of small tweaks, that's when the process will work as a well-oiled machine. So that is the goal you must have: to make a good process, keep improving it, and make the process the machine that takes you towards your dreams. So the process itself has to be the goal. That's how you become successful, and that's how you set and achieve goals, which are actually dreams. So that's what I can say in brief about this. Okay, Harsh says, can we say that the British occupation of India was also because of the Mughals, as Fahrukhsiyar gave the Dewani rights of Bengal to the East India Company, the most wealthy province of India? That's a very interesting question. I'm sure most of you have not heard of this individual called Fahrukhsiyar. He was one of the later Turkic kings of a small portion of northern India. And so, to explain what really happened, let me show you a very interesting article. Let me share that article with you. So that is the best way that in which I can explain it, because this article brings this entire story out very well. So let me share my screen with you. 1 second. Okay. So this is an article by Rakesh Krishnan Simha, The Mughal Tax Break That Cost India Its Freedom. So exactly 300. Let me just read out the first few paragraphs so that you understand in detail. So 300 years ago, approximately, the Mughal Emperor Fahrukhsiyar issued a farman that allowed the East India Company to conduct duty-free trade, mint its own coins, and the right to fortify its garrisons, allowing the English to establish colonial rule in India with relative ease. So since the year 1600, the English had been trying to gain a foothold in India, but were not able to break the monopoly of the Portuguese and the Dutch. So the Portuguese and the Dutch were far ahead of the English around that time. Most of the early embassies sent by the English monarch had returned home empty handed. 150 years after its foundation, the East India Company was only a zamindar, a landlord at Chennai and Kolkata, and a mere trader at its inland factories. But patience, being an English virtue, began to pay dividend, and a big one at that. By the 1650s, the English had obtained exemption from road tax in the provinces of Agra, Awadh, and adjoining areas. From the beginning, the sole aim of the English was to avoid payment of the usual taxes and tolls that were paid by everyone else. Now, in November 1715, an English embassy led by John Sermon had a stroke of luck when one of its members, William Hamilton, a physician, managed to relieve the Emperor Fahrukhsiyar of severe pain in his groin. Peter Auber quotes from reports of the embassy to Kolkata. The emperor celebrated his recovery by a public darbar 30th November 1715, at which he rewarded Hamilton with a splendid gown, diamond rings, a crest with precious stones, gold buttons set with jewels, a miniature gold set of whatever medical instruments, an elephant, a horse, and rupees 5,000. However, the English had not come for these small trinkets. They hung around Delhi for 2 more years for the real prize. In April 1717, the embassy hit pay dirt when Farrukhsiyar issued three separate farmans for each of the three presidencies of Kolkata, Mumbai, and Chennai. Other demands submitted by the embassy were covered by separate directives or hasbul ul hukums. When the farmans reached Kolkata, Chennai, and Mumbai, the presidents and councils received it with regal honors and so on. So, in return for a paltry payment of rupees 30,000 per year, the Farman gave the English a virtual carte blanche, the right to export and import goods in Bengal without paying taxes, permission to purchase 38 villages surrounding the three already held by the company, the right to keep a garrison, that is a military garrison, and to further fortify Kalikata, the right to issue dastaks or passes, which would ensure the free passage of goods under the name of the company without being checked at custom houses, the right to mint gold and silver coins, which would be honored throughout the Mughal Empire, their own currency, complete freedom to establish factories at any place the provinces were to provide the company with assistance. The company would retain its old privilege of tax exemption in Hyderabad province, no increase in the company's existing rent at Chennai, exemption from paying all customs and dues at Surat, and the company's servants were permitted to trade but were not covered by the farmans. They were required to pay the same taxes as Indian merchants, etc. So this is what this individual Farrukhsiyar, the so-called Mughal emperor, did. He gave this incredible largesse to the East India Company. He essentially converted the East India Company from a trading organization into a political force in India. So, to answer the question, yes, the British occupation of India was to a great to a great extent because of this action of the so-called emperor Farrukhsiyar, who gave all these rights to the East India Company in Bengal and other places. And that's how the East India Company was overnight transformed into a political force and a military force in India. Okay, Knowledge Seeker says, how often in a century or so does Bharat get a great leader? By seeing the patterns of history. So let's examine the great leaders of the past. So when we talk about the last great leader that India had, I can think of the great Chatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, right? So he lived in the 17th century between 1630 and 1680. So that's the last great king of India. He set the foundation for what would eventually become the great Maratha Empire. But it is because of him and the groundwork that he did and the framework, the political and military framework that he created, that the Maratha Empire was able to essentially reconquer all of India from the Turks. So the last great leader is Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj in the 17th century. Before him, we had two great leaders that I can think of, that I consider great. the two great Chola emperors, Raj Chola in the late 10th and early 11th century, and his son, the great Rajendra Chola, in the 11th century. So Raj Chola set the foundation in southern India, in the entirety of the Indian peninsula almost, and his son Rajendra Chola took that forward and established an enormous maritime empire because of his powerful navy. So these are the two great emperors of the Chola dynasty in the 10th and 11th century. Before that, you had Lalitaditya Muktapida, the great Kashmiri emperor who conquered great parts of Central Asia and much of India. So he lived in the 8th century. Before him, we had the great Samudragupta, the great emperor Samudragupta, who lived in the 4th century. He conquered enormous parts. I mean, he had an enormous empire of his own. Before Samudragupta, before him, the previous great emperor of India was the great Kanishka the Great, in the 2nd century AD. And before Kanishka the Great, you had people like before him we had the great emperor Chandragupta Maurya in the in the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE. So from this partial list of great emperors of India, kings of India, one could say that you come across a great king or emperor in India, or a great leader, one would say, in India, once every 300 to 500 years. Once every 3 to 500 years, you get a great leader in India. So it's been about, how long has it been since the great Shivaji Maharaj died? 1680, 17, 18, 19, 20. It's about 350 years it's been. So I think it's high time for us to get a great leader of that caliber, because India needs that right now. So India has seen rises and falls, ups and downs, but the past 1000 years have been uniformly bad. So it's time for India to discover a new great leader who can pull India out of the current mediocrity it is in, and propel India again to the greatness that is rightfully her own. Right? So let's see how that goes. Okay, Avinash says, how can we define universe? What came first, matter or empty space? Good question. So I would define universe. What is the universe? It is all of space time and everything that exists within it, which is radiation, matter, and it also includes all the physical laws that govern energy and matter. So that's what I would use as the definition of universe. That is what the universe is. Now, what came first, matter or empty space? What came first was space time and pure energy. So in the very initial moments after the Big Bang, the universe was just energy, pure energy, extremely highly compressed, condensed energy into a very small point. So it was space time and energy, and the grand unified force out of which all the other forces have eventually emerged. So that is what came first, not matter, not empty space, space time and pure energy. That's what came first. Okay, Gokul says, how did Jupiter become a failed star? So what is a star? A star is a big, mostly spherical uh, ball of mostly hydrogen gas that is undergoing fusion because of the enormous weight of the gas. So this gas, because of the force of gravity, compresses the insides of the star, and that ignites fusion because of the enormous forces that are involved in this. So that's how you have the ignition of fusion inside a newborn star, and that is what makes stars shine and glow and give off the radiation that we see. So that's why the sun is so bright, because there is a fusion reaction going on inside, which is converting hydrogen into helium and giving off various giving off electromagnetic radiation in various spectra, including the infrared, which is heat, and visible light, and other frequencies of light. So that is what a star is. Now, why do some people call Jupiter a failed star? Jupiter is a gas giant planet. It's made up of gas. It's a big ball of gas, just like a star. But So some would characterize it as a failed star because it has not been able to ignite fusion within its core because it is not large enough. So that's why one could characterize Jupiter as a failed star. Similarly, you could also characterize Saturn as a failed star. That too is a big ball of gas, mainly I would say hydrogen with some other impurities sprinkled in. So a failed star is a big ball of gas, mainly hydrogen, that has not succeeded in in igniting nuclear fusion within its core. You also have these brown dwarfs that are like somewhere between a star and a gas giant. So that's another category of failed stars. So I think the threshold for a gas giant becoming a star is about 93 Jupiter masses, if I recall correctly. So you need to be way bigger than Jupiter in order to become the smallest category of stars. So yeah, so that's why some people would call Jupiter a failed star. Hasmukh Solanki says we understand the border dispute between countries. However, within the country, when the whole of India is one, then why do some states fight for a region not in their territory? Like in the northeastern states between Assam and Mizoram, then you have Maharashtra and Karnataka, etc. Why is this? How is this dispute different from that between countries? Yeah, this is an interesting question. You have several border disputes between various states. You have the region of Belgaum that is currently in Karnataka that Maharashtra also has a claim towards. Then Assam and Mizoram also there is some minor border dispute. Then you have Nagaland, which claims the entirety of the northeast, more or less, even parts of Burma. They call it Nagalim or whatever it is, and so on. You have these territorial disputes. You also have this dispute about water sharing. The Kaveri water dispute. It's been going on for decades, I think. So what is the root cause of all these disputes? The root cause of these disputes is the way the British divided India into provinces, and which we have continued as states in India. So the British divided India into linguistic provinces. A province was one in which a certain language was prevalent. So today, that is the Indian states, and the Indian states are also more or less divided on linguistic lines, right? But then you have the problem that some states are enormous and some states are very small. Take Uttar Pradesh; it is as big, almost as big. I mean, as half of Europe, I would say. Its population is almost the same, very similar to the population of the United States. It's just one state in India. Then you have little states in the northeast like Manipur and Mizoram, etc., whose population is microscopic compared to Uttar Pradesh, right? So you have this incredible disparity in India, and because states have valuable resources, their politicians want to acquire more resources. So in case you have a linguistic region which is kind of mixed, then both states would claim it. And because if you have one more district under you, you can extract more resources out of it, more tax, more revenue, more whatever else that the politicians do. So that's why they want it, and that's why you have these disputes. See, the thing is, at the lower levels in India, in the lower levels in politics, at state level, not state, maybe state level also, I'm not saying it's everywhere, but there is certainly the presence of this. There is a lot of corruption. There's a lot of corruption in India at lower levels, district level, municipal level, ward level, etc. And if you have an extra district in your hands, you get to extract more, whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying this thing is prevalent all across India. There are places, I'm sure, which are not corrupt. I hope so. I'm sure there are, but this is the kind of thing which you have, and that's why politicians want to grab more territory, and that's why there are these territorial disputes. That's one of the reasons. So, what is the solution to this? What's the solution? The solution is very simple. Have smaller states. Why can't India have 100 states, all of which have more or less the same size? Now I can hear what people are going to say. No, you're trying to break up our unity. You're trying to destroy our unity. What about Tamil Nadu? You want to break up Tamil Nadu into into small pieces. What about Gujarat? You want to break Gujarat into small pieces and so on. I'm not saying we need to break it up. Why can't you have 5 Tamil states? or five Gujarati speaking states, or 23 uh, states that are made out of UP. See, what the thing is that when you have smaller states, smaller administrative units, then you have far better administration and far more accountability of the politicians towards the people. When a state has a population of 300 million, how will you approach the chief minister with whatever problem you have? But if you have a state with a population of just 1 million, the chief minister is far more approachable and the officials are far more approachable. So if you have smaller administrative divisions, then you have better administration, you have more accountability. So that is the way in which perhaps India's leaders should take India towards. It is all about empowering the people, making the state, the system more accountable, and delivering better governance. Right. So maybe that is something that India's leaders, not politicians are not leaders, but the real leaders of India, maybe it is something they should consider going forward in the long run. Maybe that would empower the people better. It would make India a far better governed nation. So that is something that could possibly be explored. Maybe in India with 100 states, all of a reasonably similar sizes and populations. That would make India a far better governed nation. So that's just a thought. All right. Is the government spending in the wrong places, like bullet trains and private trains? Aren't various yojanas waste of taxpayers' money, and as they are a free medium to earn for the ones who do not want to work? I don't think any other country has these types of schemes in the developed world. You know, in 1945, Japan was a nation that was in ruins. Japan was smoldering. Smoke was emanating from its major urban centers. Every single large city in Japan, or even medium city in Japan, had been bombed to the ground by the Americans. All industries were destroyed. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were nuked. Right? Japan was essentially in ruins, the whole country. And in a few decades, it emerged as the number two economy in the world, as a genuine, bona fide financial superpower, economic superpower. And what drove the transformation of Japan? It was high technology and investing this technology in creating the infrastructure that unifies the nation and allows people greater mobility and greater connectivity, so that it essentially makes running businesses and industries and governance and everything like that far easier. And what was behind this? One of the major components in this was the Shinkansen bullet train. The bullet train connected the whole of Japan and made the country, in a way, smaller. You could reach any place in a couple of hours. And they made it affordable as per the per capita GDP of Japan. So that is something that transformed Japan. Now we have witnessed the rise of China in the past 2 decades. One of the factors that has propelled this rise of China is the Chinese bullet train network. China has today, they have built over the past 2 decades the largest bullet train network in the world, high speed trains. And because of this, people are able to travel all across China very quickly. It's enabled people to commute from their residence to a far off place, to a place of work, and come back in the night, that sort of thing. So if you invest in this sort of connectivity, this sort of infrastructure, it pays back hundreds of times, the kind of investment you made in the long run. It's like, why do we need rockets? Why do we need ISRO? What does it do for the common man and woman and child? It pays you back. I mean, the satellite capabilities that we have, they empower Indians so much. We don't even understand the impact of that technology. Our day-to-day life would not be possible without the technology. Similarly, bullet trains are needed. India has a horribly outdated railway system. You want to go somewhere by train, you have to book a ticket 1 month in advance. If the website allows you to book, there's always a waiting list and God knows what. In a civilized, developed country, let's say you're sitting in Madurai, southern India. Let's say you wake up this morning or tomorrow morning and you decide, for whatever reason, I need to go to Guwahati. In a civilized country, you should be able to just go to the station, purchase a ticket on the spot, sit on a train in the next half an hour, and be in Guwahati within 6 to 8 hours. That is what a developed, civilized country looks like. Today, you have these extremely slow trains compared to bullet train standards that you can't even walk to a station and book a ticket right away and get into a train. You have to book a month in advance, or God knows what, how long that waiting time is. So India is still in the almost in the colonial era. Most of the rail network that India has was built by the British for their extraction purposes, for the purpose of plundering India. India has not added much to it. It is high time India creates its own 21st century bullet train infrastructure. It doesn't necessarily have to be bullet trains. They need to be high speed trains, and we need to have the kind of infrastructure where you can just walk into a station on whenever needed, buy a ticket, purchase a ticket, and be on a train within the next 30 to 60 minutes and go wherever you need to go. There should be no waiting list and all that nonsense. That's what a civilized, developed country looks like. So that's what India needs. So I don't think it's wrong spending. There are certain yojanas that you speak about that are a complete waste of money. I do not disagree with that. But the bullet train infrastructure, other infrastructures that India is building, it is an investment for the future. It is your children and your grandchildren who will benefit from that. But various employment generation schemes and whatever else, that is a waste of money. But that is because of political compulsions. In India, certain things, the way the Indian political system works, you have to throw money, lots of taxpayer money, at various sections of society in order to keep getting those votes. That's just how it is. It's what the politicians created in the 1950s, 60s, 70s onwards, and and we are reaping the rewards of that system, that horrible system. So I hope in the coming decades, all this will change. Leadership, that's what we need. Okay, Ashish says, you said Gandhi was a British agent, but Abdul Gaffar Khan was a great freedom fighter. But Abdul Gaffar Khan also used non-violent resistance to fight against the British. And Abdul Gaffar Khan was known as the frontier Gandhi because he followed the ideals of Mahatma Gandhi. My dear friend Ashish Dar, let me ask you something. I agree. Abdul Gaffar Khan was a great freedom fighter. I agree. I agree that he used non-violent resistance to fight the British. I agree. I agree that he was called the frontier Gandhi because he followed the ideals of Mahatma Gandhi. I agree. Now, please tell me something. Did Abdul Gaffar Khan succeed in achieving his objective of a unified India? What was his objective? His objective was a unified India, a unified subcontinent. He did not want partition. He opposed partition. He wanted a peaceful, united India. Did he succeed in his objective? He failed. Now, please tell me, why did he fail? He failed because of the methods he adopted. He adopted non-violent resistance. He adopted Gandhi's ideals. What happened? What was the outcome? He failed. End of story. Okay. If Gandhi was a British agent, why did Churchill hate him so much? I would not agree that Winston Churchill hated Gandhi. We know what Churchill said about Gandhi, right? What do those pronouncements actually tell us? They tell us that Winston Churchill had contempt for Mohandas Gandhi. He was contemptuous towards Gandhi. He had no respect towards Gandhi. Hating somebody and being contemptuous and disrespectful is two different things. You can hate somebody but respect them. Do you know that? The thing is, Churchill did not respect Gandhi. He was contemptuous towards Gandhi. It is not hatred, it is a lack of respect that he consistently demonstrated towards Gandhi. Now, I want you to ask yourselves why Churchill was unable to find any respect in his heart for Mohandas Gandhi. Please ask yourselves. Pakta, Pakta says, your face looks like the former president of Pakistan, Yahya Khan Pathan. Let's take a look at Yahya Khan Pathan, shall we? Hang in there. Let me share my screen. Yahya Khan. He was a Pashtun, yes. What did he look like? This is what this guy looked like. Check out those eyebrows, guys. Check out those eyebrows. Wow. I certainly don't have that sort of eyebrows. Incredible eyebrows. So this is what it looked like. Do I look like this? Maybe I may look like that when I'm 70 years old or something. There he is with Richard Nixon. Yahya Khan. Anyhow, so yeah, there he is with the American president, Richard Nixon, another crook. So the thing is, see, the thing is this. I don't know if I look like him or not, but the thing is that Indians and Pashtuns, the people of Afghanistan, are the same people. We have the same origins. In a previous episode, I've actually demonstrated that with genetic evidence from various research papers that conclusively show that the Pathans, the Pashtuns, have the same genetics, the same origins as the rest of the Indian population. So if I look like somebody who has Pashtun ethnicity or somebody else, it's no surprise. It's no surprise. We are the same people. Afghanistan is Gandhar. That's part of India. That's historically been part of India for thousands of years, from the Mahabharata and pre-Mahabharata days, from the Vedic days, and even before that. So there's no surprise if the people of India and the Pashtun people look similar, because we are the same people. We have the same ancestry. Okay. The question is by Ahmad Ilahi. I am from Pakistan. I want to know your opinion about India-Pakistan Confederation, which we can call a union like the European Union. Is it possible? So let's understand what the EU is, the European Union. It's a political union of a number of countries in Europe, and it is based upon certain shared values, shared principles, and shared objectives. So there is a great deal of political consonance between the nations that make up the European Union. They are bound by they have agreed to follow the same laws and allow free access to each other's territory for the citizens, and so on and so forth. So there is a great deal of commonality between them, and they have agreed willingly to adhere to certain rules, principles, laws, and all that. So there is political unity there, right? Now, let's take India and Pakistan. Do we have that sort of political consonance, cultural consonance? Do we have that? Religious consonance? Do we have that? I have absolutely nothing against the people of Pakistan. I have said this many times, whether we are the same people, we are the same roots, the same past, same ancestry, and all that. But India and Pakistan are very different countries today. Very, very, very different countries. Pakistan is a dictatorship run by the Pakistani army. It is now essentially a vassal of China. It sees India as the mortal enemy. Its highest ambition is to conquer India someday and destroy whatever is left of Indian culture in India. These are undeniable facts. So, can we have a political unity between India and Pakistan given these circumstances? It's not possible today. It's not possible at all today. I would like very much to see the Indian subcontinent unite again in the future, but this has to be a long-term project. This has to be a long-term project. It is not going to happen for, let's say, the next 100 years, at least. It's not going to happen for at least the next 100 years because of the inherent deep rooted cultural, religious differences, the different mindsets, the different worldviews. You simply can't have um, political unity or some kind of confederation, because in any confederation you need open borders, you need free flow of people. It is not in India's interests to allow free flow of people from Pakistan at any time in the near future or even the medium term future. It's just not in India's interests. And therefore, good as this suggestion is, as good as it is, I mean, it's not practical as of now, and it's not going to be practical in the next 50 to 100 years. In the long run, I would like to see India, I mean, the Indian subcontinent, reunite again and reclaim its past glory, and see a proper revival of its original indigenous culture. Okay, Harshit Rai says, my question is, why does the Taliban not recognize the Durand line? So I may have spoken about this in the past. I have several episodes on Afghanistan, but let's go into it once again, because I'm sure there are lots of new viewers who may not have seen that. So let's talk about it. So if you look at the past history of Afghanistan, of Gandhar, it was part of India. It was a Hindu Buddhist uh, part of India, right? But then you had the Turkic invasions, and you had this change of culture, forcible, obviously. All the monuments, everything was destroyed. All the temples, stupas, everything is in ruins now, and there was the entire change in culture that was engineered by the Turks in Afghanistan. So, so Afghanistan is essentially the original Kashmir. That's what happened there. Now, so the people of Afghanistan eventually became culturally different, and then you had these invasions of India emanating from Afghanistan in the past 1,000 years, right? Now, in the 18th century, you had this individual called Ahmad Shah Abdali. Nowadays, they call him Ahmad Shah Durrani. He launched 8 invasions into India with the objective of plundering the land in the 18th century, right? It caused a great amount of death and destruction in India. A lot of plunder was taken out of India by this individual. This was in the 18th century. Then what happened is that you had this new political entity that emerged in northern India, which was the kingdom of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who lived in the late 18th and first half of the 19th century, right? So he unified the various Sikh factions and created the Sikh kingdom, or well, it's called the Sikh Empire, though even though it was not very large, it's called the Sikh Empire. So he was one of the great kings, and what he did was that he punished the Afghans for all the depredations they had done in India, all the plunder, all the atrocities, the massacres, etc. He punished the Afghans for that. He went to war with the Afghans. He conquered a great deal of Afghan territory, right? And he created a very large kingdom or empire in northern India, which included significant portions of what is called Pashtunistan. So lots of Pashtun territory, he captured that and he incorporated that into his kingdom. It came under his political dominion. So the Sikh Empire included large parts, significant portions of Pashtun dominated, Pashtun majority territory. Now, Maharaja Ranjit Singh died in 1839. Within a decade, the Sikh Empire crumbled, right? And the British took over. Now, what the British did was that they used the border of the Sikh Empire as their own border with Afghanistan, essentially, the border between British India and Afghanistan. So that became the foundation of the Durand Line. The Durand Line was delineated in 1893. It was drawn by the British, and it was essentially the border of the Sikh Empire, which Maharaja Ranjit Singh had conquered. It included parts of Pashtun dominated territory. So that was then reconfirmed in the Anglo Afghan Treaty of 1919, in which the Afghan kingdom the king of Afghanistan, Amir of Afghanistan, he agreed with the British in this treaty to treat this Durand line as the boundary between Afghanistan, which was a sovereign independent nation, and British India. So that is the history of the Durand line, which is essentially the border of the Sikh Empire. Now, in 1947, Pakistan partitioned from India. It became a separate nation, and the Durand line was then used as the boundary between Pakistan and Afghanistan. But the people of Afghanistan, the Pashtuns, they have this historical grudge that this is our territory that you have taken over, even though our king agreed in this treaty with the British, but now the British are gone. Angrez to chale gaye. The British are gone. So why should we now recognize this Angrezi line on the map as our boundary? We have our people living on the other side in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Northwest Frontier Province, etc. Right? So they do not recognize the Durand line as the legitimate boundary between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And that is the reason why the Taliban, which essentially are a Pashtun nationalist force, they do not recognize the Durand line as the legitimate boundary between Pakistan and Afghanistan. There is a big territorial dispute between Pakistan and Afghanistan, which the Taliban has inherited. And it is going to be fun and games to watch how it plays out over the next 3 to 5 years. Because the Taliban do not recognize that as the boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and they have a territorial claim on Pakistan. So right now, the Pakistanis have engineered a certain kind of leadership in the Taliban. They have put their own people in leadership positions in the Taliban. How long will it last in this terrorist organization? Things will change. Things are going to change. Wait and watch. And then we're going to have some fireworks over there. So it's a matter of time, nothing more. Okay, we say that Shivaji, that Chatrapati Shivaji is the father of the Indian Navy, but ships and boats were there even before him also. So why do we call him as the father of the Indian Navy? So you're absolutely right. The thing is that Chhatrapati Shivaji was, and the Maratha Empire as a whole, where was the last sovereign Indian political entity that had its own navy, and it had a very powerful navy, very agile, very lean, and very powerful, very efficient, very effective naval force led by the great Kanoji Angre, I believe, right? And it defeated the Portuguese and the British in many battles and all that. So yes, that was the last independent sovereign Indian navy that we had before the British Indian Navy came into force. India has always been a maritime nation. When that individual, what's his name, Vasco da Gama, he went around the Cape of Good Hope, he had the biggest ship that the Portuguese were able to build, and he saw Indian ships there were like 3-4 times the size of his ship. So that tells you the great history of Indian shipbuilding. India was the greatest shipbuilding nation on the surface of the planet for most of known history, and even before that. So if you talk about the great Cholas, the Chola Empire, they had a powerful, really powerful navy which they used to conquer the entirety of Southeast Asia. They invaded Southeast Asia by putting infantry, soldiers, etc., on big naval ships, and they were able to go all the way, cross the Bay of Bengal, cross the Malacca Strait, get into the so-called South China Sea, which is actually the Champa Sea, and conquer all these territories there. That's how powerful their navy was. So clearly there were powerful naval forces before the Marathas. And even if you talk about Samudragupta the great emperor Samudragupta, he also had a powerful navy which he used to conquer much of, if not most of, southern India and bring it under his political dominion. So he also used naval force. And we have, we had the great kingdoms in Kalinga, which used navy, which had powerful naval capabilities. We know that I have spoken about this in a previous episode. You can see the short clip which is there on this channel, and so on. And even in the Vedas, there are mentions of ships with 100 oars. That is a pretty big ship, right? And if you go to Southeast Asia, Cambodia, etc., where you have Kalinga influence, you will see depictions of great ancient Indian ships in those Shaivite Hindu kingdoms, right? So that's what you had. That is the great history of Indian shipbuilding and Indian naval power, which your history textbooks and your teachers do not want you to know about. So these are the facts. So India has always been a great maritime nation and civilization. Okay, what is the bare minimum requirement? Aditya Chaudhary asks, what is the bare minimum requirement of number of warships and submarines that the Indian Navy should have to counter China and other neighbors? Also, number of planes the IAF needs. Okay, let us go to the map to understand how to approach this question. So this is the Indian Ocean region. As you can see, India dominates the Indian Ocean region. India is in this spectacularly God-gifted position geographically in the Indian Ocean region, right? So India has been given this gift by the gods of being able to dominate this region if it so wishes. So how many naval ships do you need to, what's the question? To counter China and other neighbors. So if you look at the Indian Ocean region, if you can see my mouse pointer, this region that India calls its strategic backyard. It is approximately, I would say, 10 million square kilometers or more than that, right? That is a big piece of naval real estate, 10 million square kilometers at least. So that is what India needs to dominate in order to counter China and other neighbors. So, how many warships do you think we need to have patrolling this region at any given point in time? I would say at least 100 warships at any given point in time, because to dominate a region, you need a visible presence there at all times, constant patrolling, constant presence. You should be seen to be there. Yes, there are Indian ships everywhere. That's what you need to have. So to patrol this region of 10 million square kilometers, you would need to have constant deployment of at least 100 warships, which would include destroyers, cruisers, frigates, corvettes, etc. And you would also need at least 30 submarines to be deployed in this huge region at any given point in time, constantly. Only then can you dominate this region and consider it to be your strategic backyard. Now, there's this there is a very hard fact in the Navy, which most people don't know about, that for every 3 ships you have, only one is actively deployed at any time, because one ship will be at port undergoing repairs, refueling, renovation. One ship will be either coming to the port or going towards its destination, and one will be actively deployed. So for every 3 ships, for every 3 naval assets you have, only one will be typically deployed at any given point in time. So if India needs at least 100 warships to be deployed at any given point in time, India actually needs to build at least 300 warships. That's what India needs. If you want at least 30 submarines to be deployed at any given point in time, you must have at least 90 submarines in your navy. So that is what India needs to do. India is far away from that right now. India's naval strength is about 120, 130. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but many of those assets are not warships. There are tankers, there are other things and all, and so on and so forth. So India needs to invest significant funds into building a modern 21st century navy with the numbers that we just mentioned. We need destroyers, we need cruisers, frigates, corvettes. Missile boats are also a very useful addition to your navy, and they are quite cheap actually if you know how to build them. And submarines. We need various kinds of submarines, including nuclear submarines, which we are building, but we are still far from the numbers that we need. So that is the kind of situation that we would like to see in, and if we get those numbers in our kitty, then the Chinese will not be able to interfere in our strategic backyard. Now, when it comes to the IAF number of planes, they say we need 32, 33, 34 squadrons of planes. A squadron is typically roughly 20 planes, 22, right? But I would say the more the better. We don't need the latest, most high tech planes. We can, the thing is this, quantity has a quality of its own. If you look at the Chinese Air Force, they have large numbers. Many of those planes that they have are very antiquated planes, but they still use them. Let's say you have a plane of the caliber of a MiG 21, which is a 1960s plane. But what if you have 1,000 of those? What if you have 1,000 of those planes of the caliber of a MiG 21? They will overwhelm any air force from our neighborhood. So we need quantity, we need quality. We are developing high quality aircraft. The LCA Tejas Mark 1A is soon to be, the mass production will start in a couple of years, I think. Then you have the medium weight fighter. We have the twin engine deck based fighter. And then we have the AMCA, the advanced combat aircraft, which will be a fifth generation stealth aircraft. So all those are being developed. But what we can do in the interim is to churn out lots of these Tejas Mark 1A aircraft. We need numbers, we need quality as well. So I would say India needs at least 500 fighter aircraft, and maybe we can also invest in heavy duty bombers. Maybe acquire some from Russia or build our own. So this is something that needs to happen in the next 10-20 years maximum in order for India to become immune to the threats from its neighborhood. Okay, Dominic says Israel recently carried out an airstrike on the Latakia port in Syria, but the S-400s were not able to take down the Israeli fighter jets, as at the same time a Russian plane was in the air. Is it the same with every S-400 system in other countries too? No, it is not the same. The S-400 is not a low-quality inferior system. It is the most dangerous air defense system that currently exists. Now we have the S-500, which is even better, I hear, and even the S-550 is being developed. But among the major air systems that we have, the S-400 is one of the best in its class. It's far superior to the American system, the Israeli system, etc. So, and it has this friend or foe identification also inbuilt into it, which ensures that even in a contested airspace, when you have two kinds of fighter aircraft from two opposing forces engaged in air combat, it will not shoot down your aircraft. It will only target the enemy aircraft. So it has all those capabilities. So the question is, when the Israelis just a few days ago carried out at least one or two airstrikes on the Latakia port in Syria, why was no action taken? Why was the S-400 there unable to take out the Israeli planes? Because there is an S-400 system deployed nearby. It's a Russian system. The Russians are operating it because the Russians have geopolitical interests in Syria. See, here's the situation. There was this attempt about 10 years ago to bring down the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. It was a Western attempt to do that. Now, Vladimir Putin and Russia intervened in this, and they succeeded in ensuring that the Syrian government is not overthrown. Today, the Bashar al-Assad is quite secure in Syria, thanks to the Russian help, and the Russians are operating various military bases, etc., in Syria. They have this S-400 system near the Latakia port, where they also have some naval assets from time to time, right? And then the Israelis did this. They bombed the port, and there was no response from the S-400. Why is this? It is because the Russians chose not to bring down the Israeli planes. Whether there was a Russian plane in the air at that time or not is immaterial. The S-400 will not bring down a Russian plane. The Russians chose not to stop the Israelis and not to target their planes. They allowed the Israelis to carry out this airstrike or airstrikes on the Latakia port. Why is that? They are on the side of the Syrians, right? They are supporting Bashar al-Assad. Then why did they allow the Israelis to carry out an airstrike? That is the question. See, here's the thing. Even Iran has an interest in Syria. The Iranians are also trying to play geopolitical games in Syria. They want to use parts of Syria as their strategic backyard, right? And the Russians do not want that. Now, it is quite possible that the Iranians had sent some shipments to Latakia port, which included weapons, ammunition, etc. Because when this airstrike happened, that consignment which was targeted, it burned for more than a day, and there were explosions and all that. So clearly, there was some ammunitions and weaponry in there. Maybe it came from Iran, and maybe the Russians don't want any Iranian presence or hand in Syria. They want Syria all to themselves, right? So maybe that's why they allowed the Israelis to target the Iranian shipment in this port. So, we don't have definitive answers, but we know what's happening. And based on our knowledge of what's happening, we can kind of reconstruct probable scenarios of why the S-400 was not activated. It is an extremely, extraordinarily capable system. It could have certainly taken down the Israeli planes, but the Russians chose not to. Okay, I want to ask you, I am currently pursuing aerospace engineering in an IIT. People say that for you to have a good career in this field, you have to move out of India to work. But I want to stay in India and work in organizations like ISRO, DRDO, etc., and help my country in some way. Please guide me. First of all, congratulations on pursuing this aerospace engineering in an IIT. That's a very good accomplishment in itself. Now, your aim is to help India in some way, and you want to do that by working in ISRO or DRDO or one of these major organizations. So, when you are young, when you're a student and you are planning a career, you need to have your main goal, main objective, which you can call Plan A. Then you should also have Plan B, Plan C, and Plan D. So, Plan A for you clearly is that you want to work in ISRO or DRDO. So make that your primary objective. So to get a job in ISRO or DRDO, I think you will need to get exceptionally high marks, high grades in your IIT coursework. And if you are an outstanding student, you should have a very good chance of getting into ISRO or DRDO when you apply, as long as applications are open. So that should be your primary objective, Plan A. But that should not be your only plan. If it fails, then what do? You should also have Plan B, Plan C, Plan D. So Plan B, Plan C, Plan D, you need to figure out what that is for you. There is no harm if this Plan A doesn't work. There is no harm that in trying to go abroad. If you have good marks, excellent grades, then you'll be able to work abroad. You can do that for 5 years, 10 years maybe, gain some expertise, gain some experience, gain new skills, and then maybe you can come back to ISRO or DRDO. So what I'm saying is that it's a very good thing that you want to work in ISRO, DRDO, or whatever else. You should make that your primary objective and invest all your time, all your energy, all your efforts into succeeding in that. But also have Plan B, Plan C, and Plan D ready and well thought out in case Plan A doesn't work, because life has all kinds of uncertainties. No matter how good you are, sometimes things may not work your way. So always ensure that you have backup plans. That's what I would say. But I would like to wish you the best. I hope that you succeed in this objective of working in ISRO or DRDO. I wish you the best. Okay, I don't want to reveal my name. Says, I am a student of 17 to 19 age. I feel I am not free. I am constantly under the control of my parents. I want to break free from all mental hurdles, pressures, the ruling attitude of my parents, and this continuous feeling of humiliation. But then comes the need of money and the basic necessities, and I feel bogged down, and I feel that I can't do anything and I have to face it. Am I immersed in my problem? So I'm not able to understand how could I be free? How can I make my environment and everyone very good and very sweet for me? So, you know what? Your parents are usually your best friends. The overwhelming majority of parents want their children to succeed, and they do everything they can to support their children and help them succeed in the best possible way. Now, there are good people, there are bad people in the world, and similarly, in some rare cases, some people may have bad parents. That possibility is always there. In some rare cases, your parents may not be very good for you. Their attitudes may be stifling, or maybe they are too controlling, or maybe they want you to go in a certain direction which you don't want to go in. They, these things happen. Yes, it all depends on what cards the gods have dealt you. Sometimes you get unlucky and you face this sort of situation. So the thing is, you have stated the problem that you're facing, and in the statement, in the definition of the problem, you are also given the solution. So you are right now 17 or 19, you are a student in a good organization, in a good institution, that is very good. The problem you are facing, the real problem you're facing, is the need of money and basic necessities, right? So that is also the solution. What you need to do is right now focus on your studies, do very well in your studies, get good grades, get yourself a good job after that, and that ends the problem, which is the need of money, which ties you to the whims and fancies of your parents. So in case your parents are, well, too controlling and humiliating you or whatever, like you say, then what you need to do is invest the next 3 to 5 years in getting a stable, good job, which will eliminate any problem of money that you have. And once you have the money to live your life on your own terms, then, well, you will not have that problem anymore. So the problem that you've stated, it contains the solution in itself. So that's what I can say. You need to become financially independent, and then you will be able to go in whatever direction you like. All the best. Anmol says, in the flair of leadership, is Deng Xiaoping the greatest of all time, especially of the 20th century? Well, Deng Xiaoping is clearly one of the greats of the 20th century. So there are a number of people in the 20th century who can be considered to be great leaders, right? He's not the only one. Among the great leaders I can think of, I can give names such as Mustafa Kemal Ataturk of Turkey, who essentially created the modern nation of Turkey. He created the modern nation of Turkey out of the ruins of the Ottoman Empire. Turkey was at the time under foreign occupation. He led the Turkish War of Independence, and he created this independent, united, secular nation of Turkey. He is called Ataturk, which means the father of the Turks. So he's one of the greats of the 20th century. Then you have people like Dwight Eisenhower, who fought as a soldier, as a major general in the Second World War. As president, he created NATO, so he had a huge impact on the world, and his impact still continues today. Then you have, whether you like it or not, you have Joseph Stalin, who defeated Hitler and laid the foundations of the great Soviet Union. Then you have Lee Kuan Yew, who transformed Singapore from a third world nation to a very, very prosperous first world nation in just 20 years. Then you have people like Mao Zedong. Well, you may not like him, but he clearly created the modern nation of China under the Chinese Communist Party. He established the Chinese Communist Party as the undisputed power in China. Then you have people like Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping essentially transformed China from the agrarian, poverty-stricken days of Mao Zedong and he transformed it into he set in motion the process of converting China into a modern, developed nation. So what you see in China today, the transformation that we've seen over the past 2 decades, it owes its genesis, its roots to the work of Deng Xiaoping. And what Deng Xiaoping did was he tried to emulate the actions of Lee Kuan Yew. So there was a great deal of learning in China from the policies of Lee Kuan Yew, which were implemented in Singapore. And then you have somebody like Ronald Reagan, also, that I can think of, who is maybe the last great American president. So these are some of the people who are the greats of the 20th century. They have, in many ways, shaped the world that we live in today. Is Deng Xiaoping the greatest of all time of the 20th century? He's one of the greats. I would not call him the one person who is head and shoulders above everybody else, but he's clearly one of the greats. Okay. Kayan Dotiwala says, greetings from the parsons of Bombay. Greetings, greetings, sir. Why are the Finns and the Russians not considered European? On my visit to Norway, I was told that only blonde haired, and blue eyed individuals are considered true Europeans, and any European with swarthy features like dark hair or dark eyes is said to have some sort of foreign admixture. That's why they believe that Spaniards and Greeks look different from Swedes, as they are very close to North Africa and have swarthy features. You know, the definition of a European is somebody who lives in Europe. So Europe is the western part of Eurasia. The boundary is typically the Caucasus Mountain region, right? So anybody who lives west of that is, by definition, European. Now, the definition that you are referring to, that you have heard from some people, is a very racist definition of Europeans. That only people with blonde hair and blue eyes are Europeans. What nonsense! There are people in the Celtic regions of Europe, the Western Europe, who, many of whom have red hair. Are they not Europeans? If you go to Ireland, Scotland, there are lots of people with red hair. Are they also, I mean, are they no longer Europeans because of the color of their hair? The Greeks, I mean, the Greek civilization is considered to be the foundation of Western civilization. Most Greeks have light brown skin and dark hair and dark eyes. So, this definition doesn't really hold. Some racist people, like the Nazis, for instance, they would have held such ideas. Such ideas were in currency during the Nazi age and all that, but I don't think this is a mainstream view at all. If some people hold such views, those are very regressive and very racist views. So they are being racist towards their fellow Europeans based on their features, these swarthy features. So if you have darkish skin, light brown skin, then you are no longer European. That way, I mean, so that's a very racist attitude to have. I suppose some people in Europe may have that. But if that is to be held as true, then only a small portion of Europe would actually count as Europe, which is nonsense. So, that's what I can say about this. It's a very racist attitude to have if someone said this. Ashish says, is China a dharmic country because it is a Buddhist country? So China does have the largest Buddhist population of any nation in the world, more than 200 million practicing Buddhists in China. But China is not a Buddhist country. China is officially a communist country, a socialist country. The official doctrine is atheism. That's the official doctrine of the Chinese Communist Party, right? China is officially an atheist country. Nowadays, they tolerate the practice of Buddhism by a significant portion of the population, which is like 1/6 or 1/7 of their population. But the overwhelming majority of Chinese, they profess atheism. And the official doctrine, policy is atheism. Therefore, China is not a Buddhist country. And therefore, China is not a dharmic country. A country can be considered to be dharmic if its official policies are dharmic policies. The Communist Party's policies are the opposite of dharmic policies. And therefore, China cannot be considered to be a dharmic country. India cannot be considered to be a dharmic country. India is officially a secular country. India is one of the most Hindu-phobic countries in the world. India itself is not a dharmic country. Sri Lanka can be considered to be a dharmic country because its official state religion, so to say, is Buddhism. It is enshrined in the constitution of Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka is a dharmic country, yes. Nepal was a dharmic country when it was a Hindu monarchy. That was destroyed by the Indian government's interference. So today, Nepal itself is not a dharmic country. You could say that Thailand is a dharmic country because it is, I think, officially or quasi officially a Buddhist country, and so on. So the answer, in short, is China is not a dharmic country by any means whatsoever. Sujay says, were today's Kerala and Madagascar geographically connected millions of years ago? And yes, and if yes, in what ways are they similar to each other today? Nice question. Let's go to the map. Okay. So the Indian subcontinent, about 100 million years ago, was part of the continent of Africa. And Madagascar was also attached to the Indian continent. So if you see the map here, if you can see Madagascar, if you can look upon Madagascar as a piece in a jigsaw puzzle, you can see that it will fit into the eastern coast of Africa. The shape is very similar. And if you see the shape of Madagascar, it can also fit in the western coast of India. The northern tip of Madagascar could easily fit uh, into this region, the Khambat region, the Gulf of Khambat region of India. So you can see these pieces of geography, they fit together. So what happened is that about 90 million or so years ago, because of tectonic activity, the Indian subcontinent detached from Africa, and over tens of millions of years, it traveled across the Indian Ocean, and it eventually slammed into Eurasia. And that collision is still continuing. And this collision has caused the emergence of the great Himalayan mountain range, right? So it's not just Kerala, it's the entirety of Western India, which was once attached to Madagascar. So in what way, what similarities do you see there? Let me see the question again. The question is, in what ways are they similar to each other? I think if you would do soil composition tests, etc., you would find similarities between the soil of Madagascar and the soil of the western coast, the western coastal region of India. Maharashtra, Karnataka, Kerala, even Gujarat. You will find similarities in the soil composition, in the kind of geology that you have. Of course, while India was floating in the Indian Ocean, it passed over the Réunion hotspot, and that gave rise to the enormous volcanic activity of the Deccan Traps. So that kind of changed the geological, geomorphological characteristics of the Deccan region. But you will still find some similarities between the western coastal regions of India and Madagascar if you do geological tests and soil composition tests. And you may even find similar fossils from more than 100 years ago, 100 million years ago, in these two regions. So that's what one can say about this. Okay, Arpan says, what are your views on the new Nalanda University? Has the project already failed, as the Chinese have already beat us in it by starting their own institution? If they can, we can do a comeback, and so on. Are they flawed by excluding Sanskrit from the curriculum? Okay, so I think this university, the new Nalanda University, let's take a look at what we have. Let me share my screen and let's do a Google search. So Nalanda University, new Nalanda. What do we have? What does Google search tell us? Nalanda University. Okay, so you have a Nalanda University here. And yeah, it says in 1st September 2014, so the commencement of the first academic year of the modern Nalanda University with 15 students. Let's look at what Wikipedia has to say. Once again, disclaimer, Wikipedia is not a reliable source of information, but let's just take a look at it for the sake of simplicity and brevity. So, post-independence Mahavihara, doesn't look like there's much information here. Okay, this is the new Nalanda University. It was established in 2014. The first chancellor of the university was the so-called Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. Not so-called, he was certainly a Nobel laureate. And this individual who is an ultra Marxist, was made the first chancellor of this university, right? And this modern Nalanda University, it offers master's degrees and it offers PhD courses, right? Under the modern Indian education system, which is actually a continuation of the 19th century colonial education system. So the new university they have created, they have given it the name of Nalanda. They appointed a Marxist as the first chancellor of this university, and they are offering courses according to the colonial British education system. So, what's the point of having this university, which is just another mediocre Indian university run by Marxists? What is the point of calling it Nalanda? If you want to name a new institution Nalanda, it should it should be run according to the principles of the original Nalanda University. It should not be run by Marxists, and it should offer education in the same format as, or a similar format, maybe a 21st century version of the original format of the original Nalanda University. So none of that has happened, and therefore, yes, that institution has failed. It's a failure. Calling it with a certain title is not going to make it great. What makes an institution great is the quality of the people who run the institution. And when you have somebody like Amartya Sen running a university, it's failed and doomed from the start. I don't know who is the current vice chancellor. It will be somebody pulled out of the depths of the mediocrity of India, of the modern Indian education system, and therefore it's a useless and pointless university. They should not name it Nalanda. It's an insult to the original Nalanda University. Gokul says, in ancient India, how were people who had done crimes punished? You see, ancient India is thousands of years. And over thousands of years, you have differences in the way things are done. So let's say you're talking about the Mauryan era, for instance, during the time of Chandragupta Maurya and Ashoka. At that time, the punishments were given according to the principles of Vishnugupta Chanakya, Kautilian principles. So you had harsh punishments for bad crimes. If somebody committed murder, they would be given the death sentence. But they were given, I think, a person sentenced to death was given 3 days to meet their family and say their final goodbye. So it was quite compassionate in that manner. But justice was swift, and justice was often harsh. Right now, when you go to the Gupta era, during the time of Kumara Gupta, Skanda Gupta, etc., or what's his name, Samudragupta, etc. So at that time, the I think, who was the Chinese traveler? Fahian, was it? Yeah, this guy Fahian, I think, came to India. He traveled extensively around India in the Gupta era, and he wrote that the punishments were very, very, very modest, very gentle. The death penalty was unheard of, and there was very little crime in India. So that's how it was during the Gupta era. Very, very generous or very gentle punishments, very mild punishments, and crime itself was very less. So it all depends on how efficiently you run the state, how efficient your governance is. If you are really efficient and if you are very swift in dealing out punishments, then most likely you don't have to give very harsh punishments. So it depends from time to time. In certain eras you had harsher punishments. In certain eras you had very gentle punishments, very mild punishments. So that's the kind of comparison I can offer you. I'm sure you can do more research and find more details about various other eras of Indian history and how things were done in those times. Ishwar says, the Philippines are going to buy BrahMos missiles from India. What will be the impact on China? And secondly, the Pakistanis are going to buy J-10C fighter jets from China. We know the Rafale is better, but how is the J-10C compared to the F-16 which the Pakistanis already used? Okay, I also heard the news of the Filipinos they are on the verge of a deal with the Indian government, which will enable them to acquire the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. So that's a good thing for the Filipinos. It will give them a great deal of deterrence against the Chinese. But you know what? It all depends on how you use the weapons that you have at your disposal. You may have the best weapons, but if your politicians are weak kneed, then your weapons are of no use. So it depends on how the Filipinos choose to deploy and use this missile system, assuming that the sale is is done. So I think the Filipino president Duterte has an ambivalent kind of relationship with China. He is a kind of strong man kind of personality, and he has at times shown an inclination uh, to be willing to talk with China and have some sort of have good relations. But he is also a Filipino nationalist, so he wants to make the Philippines a strong power in the region, or a strong regional power. So it all depends on how it is used, but it will certainly give the Philippines an amount of deterrence and leverage against China, because the Chinese are claiming parts of the Philippines also, the parts of Filipino territorial waters, as part of their nine dash line and all that. So it will give the Filipinos a significant amount of leverage. Now, the Pakistani deal to buy J-10C fighter planes from China. There also is a recent development. Now we know that the Rafale jet is far, far better than the J-10C. The Rafale is a heavier fighter plane. It has much more thrust. It has a better radar system, better radar capabilities. It has a better weapons package compared to the J-10C. So there's no comparison between these two aircraft. Now, the Pakistanis also use F-16s, which is a 1970s vintage fighter plane. It's still a good fighter plane, but it's an old one. So if you compare the J-10C and the F-16, the F-16 is still a superior aircraft compared to the J-10C. So why is Pakistan buying this Chinese aircraft, which is not that great? It's because they have no other option. When it comes to the F-16, there are lots of restrictions to its use. The Americans won't allow the Pakistanis to use it in certain ways, which kind of ties the Pakistani hands behind their back and behind its back in some cases. For instance, American weapon systems always have what's called what is it called? It's called a kill switch. So if you use that weapon system in a certain way, the Americans can disable it remotely, and the Pakistanis don't have the know-how to disable the kill switch. So that's why they are searching for other alternatives. They don't have a great deal of money, so they will have to buy whatever the Chinese offer them. And that is why they are acquiring the J-10C. So it will add to the numbers that they have. I think they're acquiring, I don't know, 20, 30 of these aircraft, maybe. So it's because they have no other option. That's why they are acquiring the J-10C. It's not a great aircraft, like you have rightfully pointed out. Okay, Lavia Sony says, why is our system failing to counter terrorism in Kashmir? I know that the situation is better than before, but still many innocent people are dying for just living there. So you are right. The situation is much better in recent years compared to previous years when Kashmir was uh, not doing so well, and we were allowing the Indian government was allowing all kinds of nonsense to happen there. So in recent years, the situation is much better. There are no major terrorist activities. You have all these Pakistani terrorists being eliminated on a routine basis. There are these encounters that happen from time to time, but we know what is the outcome of all these encounters. And unfortunately, sometimes you have civilian casualties because of the terrorist activities. So why is our system failing to counter this? See, when somebody is sick, let's take this the case of an individual who has tuberculosis, for instance. When a person has tuberculosis, they will have a fever, and they will have typically a persistent cough. So how should you treat this disease? Should a doctor offer the patient paracetamol or aspirin for the fever and a cough syrup for the cough. Will that solve the problem? No. So you just, if you administer paracetamol or aspirin and a cough syrup to the patient, you are treating the symptoms. You are merely treating the symptoms, but you are not treating the root cause, which is the tuberculosis bacillus that is present in this person's body and it has overwhelmed the immune system. So, to solve the problem and to cure the patient, you have to administer antibiotics that can destroy the tuberculosis bacillus, the bacterium that causes the disease. And that has to be administered for a certain period of time. Then you can solve the problem once and for all. Similarly, we are doing all these anti-terrorist activities, etc., in the Kashmir region. We are treating the symptoms. What is the root cause? The root cause is Pakistan. Terrorism will end in Kashmir when we resolve the Pakistan issue. So that's what needs to happen. That is why terrorism still persists in Kashmir from time to time, sporadically. To address the question and to resolve the problem once and for all, we have to go to the root cause of the problem and eliminate the root cause of the terrorism, which is the Pakistani army and Pakistan, well, the Pakistani state. So when we do that, the problem will be solved and the people of Kashmir will be able to finally live in peace for the first time in 70 plus years. Tanveer Sheikh says, does India have the capacity of developing an anti-nuke shield program? So when you talk about an anti-nuke shield, you're talking about a missile defense system. So we have acquired the S-400 system, but it's a foreign purchase. We have acquired it from the Russians. It's an excellent missile defense system. But the question is India capable of developing an indigenous missile defense system, ballistic missile defense system? So when it comes to cruise missiles, those are not very fast missiles. And once you detect a cruise missile, so detecting and destroying a cruise missile is the same thing as detecting and destroying an enemy aircraft. You need radar systems and you need to monitor your borders continuously. And when you detect a cruise missile, you go and address it the same way you would deal with an incoming enemy fighter aircraft. But when it comes to ballistic missiles, the entire technology and our outlook is different. So ballistic missiles are called ballistic missiles because they have this parabolic, ballistic, or quasi-ballistic trajectory, right? And that is the question. So you all know about the recent anti-satellite test that India did. India tested an anti-satellite weapon. So what India essentially did was, we had a defunct satellite in orbit around the Earth. It was our satellite, an Indian satellite. It was in low to medium Earth orbit, and we shot a newly developed missile at that satellite, intercepted it, and destroyed it. That's what India did. So what India achieved is essentially like shooting a bullet with another bullet. That's the level of precision you need to have an effective anti-satellite weapon. And the technology is exactly the same as what you would need to destroy an incoming ballistic missile. It's more or less the same technology. The level of precision is more or less the same, right? Because a satellite in Earth orbit, it travels at an extremely high velocity, very high speed, similar to a ballistic missile's speed. So India has demonstrated anti-satellite capabilities, which means that India also has anti-ballistic missile capabilities. And we already have our own system, the Prithvi Air Defense System. It's a two-level defense system. It consists of two different missiles. One missile will target incoming ballistic missiles at high altitudes, 80 to 100 kilometers, I think. And the second layer is a different missile which will target incoming missiles at about 40 kilometers altitude. So in case the first missile fails, the second missile will do the job. So it's a double tier, two tier system that we already have in place. It has been tested, it works. We don't quite know exactly what the development status is right now because we don't want to publicize it too much. Maybe we have a three tier system, or maybe we have an advanced system that we are not talking about. I'm just speculating. I'm not privy to what's really happening, but we have already demonstrated the ability to shoot down incoming ballistic missiles in the 2000s, before 2010. And even after 2010, I think 2012, 13, 14, we had certain tests of the system. I am not quite sure recently what has been done, but obviously we are developing the technology further. So we do have the technology to take down incoming ballistic missiles, nuclear missiles, and it may possibly be at an advanced level of maturity by now, because we are now in the 2020s, and one expects that technology matures as the time goes by. So I think we are in good hands. Um and yeah, so India does have the capacity of taking down incoming ballistic missiles with its own technology. uh, do vampires exist, or existed, or did they exist in the past? So what's a vampire according to the standard lore? A vampire is a person who has died and who has come back from the dead, an undead person. And this person only comes out at night because the sunlight burns their skin, and they sustain themselves by preying on living human beings and drinking their blood. So that is the standard definition of vampire from the Bram Stoker school, right? Dracula and all that. So you know what? That is obviously not possible. People cannot come back from the dead. Undead people cannot exist. It's biologically not possible. From whatever we know of biology, it's simply not possible. Otherwise, you would have vampiric animals as well if such things were possible. So those mythical, magical vampires clearly don't exist. Okay, that is simply not there. You have these ancient tradition, the ancient lore in Transylvania, etc., about vampires. Well, I think it's just folk tales and all that. There is no evidence that vampires actually exist. There's another category of vampire that people talk about. It's called the psychic vampire. It is certain individuals who suck out all the energy from any room they enter. If you interact with them for some time, you feel all drained of energy. So those are psychic vampires, or energy vampires. So that's also again kind of pseudoscience, but there are some people who have that effect, right? You talk to them, and after the interaction, you feel all tired and drained. That person is just too demanding, too narcissistic, too self-centered, and too aggressive. So those people are called energy vampires or psychic vampires, and those people, we all know some of them, either among our colleagues or friends or family or whatever. So everybody has met such people. So those vampires do exist. Some people are like that. Okay, HQ says, if genes contribute to a person's height, why are Gen Z Indians taller than their parents despite having the same genes? And Abhishek has answered, Complan. Okay, very interesting question and answer, but this answer does have a grain of truth in it. So there are two components to how tall you can be: nature and nurture. Nature is the genes that you carry. There is a certain maximum height that is programmed into your genetics. So that is the maximum height you can. When a child is born, there is a certain programming in their genes of the maximum height they can achieve, but they are not guaranteed to grow that tall. So what makes them grow to a certain height? It's the kind of upbringing they have, the kind of diet they eat, and the kind of activity level they have while they are growing. So a child who eats a very nutritious, balanced, healthy diet, and who also is very physically active, who engages in sports or athletic activities, that child will grow and reach close to the genetic maximum potential that they have. But a child who doesn't eat a good diet, eats junk food all the time, too much sugar, and is sedentary, doesn't engage in athletic activities, etc., that child will not reach its genetic maximum. Right? So Indians have a certain genetic limit which most Indians have not reached, because in the past 1,000 years, India's diet was very poor. We were under foreign occupation. The British engineered hundreds of artificial famines. So Indians underwent went through a couple of centuries of near starvation. After independence, India has been a very poor nation, a low income nation, a third world nation. The diet has been very poor. So that's why Indians are short today, right? But now that India is finally becoming a reasonably, it's beginning to take its first steps towards prosperity. So the overall diet is improving. And that's why the new kids, the Gen Z, Zoomer kids today, you will see that they are typically taller than their parents. India's genetic maximum is quite higher, quite taller than what we see on average in India today. For instance, we talk about the great Yamnaya invaders of Europe who had Indian origins. They were all approximately 6 feet tall. Very, very tall, strong, muscular guys, right? So that is an example of the kind of genetics you had in India in ancient days. Recently, they found some skeletons in UP from 30-40,000 years ago. The average height was about 6 feet 1 inches. So that kind of tells you the kind of genetic uh, programming that our ancestors had, and which we also carry. So it's all about the kind of diet you eat as a kid and the kind of activity levels you have as a kid. If you eat good diets and if you are physically very active, you're gonna get taller. Otherwise, you won't. That's how it goes. Who is David Sassoon? Was it good for Indians? David Sassoon was a drug dealer. So the history, in brief, of David Sassoon is that he was a Baghdadi Jew. He was from a prominent Jewish family in Baghdad. Uh, I think this family they were the treasurers of the king or whoever it was in Baghdad, and but because of they were Jews, they were persecuted, so they fled from Baghdad. They first went to Persia, and from Persia they came to India and they settled in Mumbai, which was then called Bombay. And they were the treasurers of that region of Baghdad. So I suppose they brought with them lots of plundered wealth. So David Sassoon was the patriarch of this family. Because of all the wealth that he brought with him from Baghdad, he was able to establish a big business in India, in Bombay. He became one of the prominent drug dealers under the auspices of the East India Company. The drug dealing happened with China. So even today in Shanghai, there is this building which is the name of the Sassoons. So they established a big trading center in Shanghai, right? This was part of the Chinese century of humiliation. So there was this big competition happening in China at the time among Indians in the drug trade. There were at least 23 other companies, all run by Parsis in Shanghai at the time. So David Sassoon was able to defeat all of them, and he became the biggest drug dealer. Opium trade in China. And that made him fabulously wealthy. It made his family fabulously wealthy. And they became one of the wealthiest families in all of Asia. And when you are a drug dealer like Pablo Escobar or somebody, you will do a lot of charitable work, small charitable works, just to make it look to the public like, you are a good person. You're giving something back to society. So David Sassoon opened some library in Bombay, David Sassoon Library, and opened some synagogues and did some other public works just to make it look like, he's a good guy. No one knew what he's doing in Shanghai. So he was a drug dealer. The family's wealth and fortune came from the drug trade. Later, they all emigrated out of India because they had so much money, and they all became part of the British aristocracy. They were invested with certain titles, baronet, etc. uh, so that in short is the story of David Sassoon, drug dealer, nothing else. Was it good for Indians? Is that even a question? He did nothing for India. Okay, this is the final question for today. What are your views on Kalicharan? Kalicharan was fantastic. He is fantastic. He is fantastic, fabulous. Fabulous West Indies left-handed batsman, brilliant attacking batsman from the 1970s and 1980s. That's one of the very best West Indies batsmen of that time. His average was in the mid 40s, but he was very good, very attacking, very aggressive, great player of fast bowling. He took Dennis Lilly and Jeff Thompson to the cleaners several times. See the videos on YouTube. So I'm a big fan of Alvin Kalicharan. That's what I have to say about Kalicharan. All right, gentlemen, ladies, friends, brothers, sisters, all of you, thank you so much for all the questions. Wonderful talking to all of you. And we will have one more session tomorrow in which I will take live chat questions. So we begin the new year with this session. I wish you all the very best in this new year. I wish you great success, great prosperity, great health, and a lot of happiness. Thank you very much for your viewership, for your support. And let's keep going. See you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.